The network will strengthen the promotion of internationalization in Finnish higher education and research by establishing links, contacts and networks. Second, the network will function as a showcase for Finnish education and research abroad, and thus attract international talent in Finland. Third, we have expertise and educational innovations, the high quality of which we can guarantee to offer to the partner countries. A steering group has been appointed to support the activities of the network. The group will be responsible for the launch of the network's activities, for guiding and monitoring the network's activities, and for communicating on the activities of the network both at national and international level. The now established network is an integral part of the government's plan to increase internationalization in higher education. A broad-based forum for international activities has been set up to monitor the implementation of the policies. I'm delighted to see so many members of the forum here today. You have a very important task ahead of you. Ladies and gentlemen, our far-reaching aim is that globally Finland is the most attractive and competent environment for experimentation and innovation. Attractiveness and competence require an element of internationality. Internationality is not an objective as such, but it's a part of a wider societal and global outlook where diversity is considered to have positive impacts on the quality of education and research. In the higher education and research sector, internationalization at home is a challenge with no simple solutions. A genuinely international community of higher education and research requires cooperation in various fields. For example, questions related to everyday lives of international experts and students and their families must be taken into consideration. The forum plays an important role also in this respect. I wish that you all, working for the Team Finland Knowledge Network and the Forum for International Activities, will enjoy the work, get to experience the power of cooperation, and benefit from networking. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tapio, and these messages are an excellent start, I think, for our work that we have ahead. So, Team Finland Knowledge Network is and would not be possible without close collaboration between different ministries and different stakeholders. So now it's my pleasure to give the floor to Ambassador of Education Export, Marianne Huuska, please.
Thank you very much, Tiina, and good afternoon to everyone. This is actually a very happy occasion. It's not often in today's world that we can be part of launching something new and putting more resources into something that we consider to be something of value and importance in our everyday work. So I consider this step that the Ministry of Education is taking a very courageous step, and thank you for taking that. I thought I would just make 3 brief remarks here on behalf of the Ministry for Foreign Affairs. We are, of course, convinced that as Finland's well-being is more and more based on knowledge, creativity and innovation, that we cannot achieve this on our own here in Finland. We are a fairly small country, a small playing field, small market, so we need to pay attention to developing our relations and interaction with the rest of the world. Our universities, our companies, our researchers, our students, they are already out there, but we also need presence of the government. We need eyes and ears to stay on the top of the latest global trends in education, science and research, and we need extra pair of hands to promote Finnish ideas and views on these topics. And I believe this is a field where our views are listened to very carefully. Secondly, let me assure you that in all our 90 representations around the world, they are already working very keenly on education and education cooperation and development cooperation in the field of education. Education is such an essential part of Finnishness. I would even go as far as saying that it's the core of our soul, and also a very, very important part of our image globally, that it's really very naturally part of every diplomat's toolbox. On the top of this general work that's now done by our career diplomats in different embassies, it will be most useful to have the eight experts joining the embassies and Team Finland networks on different continents. Our embassies in Beijing and Washington, Singapore and Buenos Aires will be welcoming the experts with open arms in August. And of course we look forward to the next wave and to have even more regions and countries to be covered. Finally, in the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, we hope that those experts in their everyday work will take a comprehensive approach to education. We believe that they should be promoting the entire Finnish education and innovation system, including less known but very interesting parts like vocational education and training or edtech solutions. Furthermore, we believe that they should be supporting, besides the actors in higher education and science, also others, including those who are willing to engage in cooperation on a commercial basis. In the other words, I think they should be overall envoys of the Finnish education. All the best to setting up the network, the forum, and this new wonderful tool that we have at our disposal as of next summer. You can rest assured that the Foreign Ministry will be there to support all this work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marianne. As you know, that we have had an expert on education and science expert counselor in Beijing already for some years, and now it is our privilege to hear Mika's voice, hopefully, from Beijing, and I'll try to find his slides that you can. Okay, Pia will do it. Wonderful, thank you. So this is something that we try and we hope that it functions. It did a couple of minutes ago before we began. Now, Mika, are you there? You can start.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Good.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon from Beijing. It's evening, wintry evening here. It's my great pleasure and honor to share you with some experiences that we had here during the past a little bit more than 5 years now. Those years have been really exciting and also been an honor for me to work for our country and the education here in this very interesting and huge country like China. I will show you 3 brief slides where I try to summarize in each of them in 3 points. First of all, why we need Team Finland Knowledge Network. Secondly, how do we succeed in doing this network? And then finally, some points about how we did in China, what we have done so far. So why do we need this kind of exercise? There really are many countries, certain countries where the role of the embassy and government is very important, or even decisive. Countries that are centralized or hierarchical or big in size, even huge, like China is. China is all of these. Like many of those countries that have been listed by the Ministry of Education, or actually all of them share some of these things. And I'm sure that this kind of officer can help a lot our stakeholders in these countries. Secondly, I think that the presence is very important because we need to achieve a grassroots level cultural and tactical understanding of the country. And this can be achieved only on site. We have to know what to do, where to go, who we should meet in these countries. And this kind of understanding cannot be achieved immediately or very quickly. It happens on site, it's constantly evolving and changing. The picture is always getting a little bit sharper and sharper. So therefore you cannot do it by just visiting a country every now and then. You have to be there, you have to breathe the atmosphere, you have to meet the people and see what is happening there all the time. And then finally, in this first slide, I think we need to build up a network of public relations, and I see the embassy like kind of a networking machine. It is producing networks, it's producing contacts, but there's no point of having a network or link contact points if you don't have any relevant stakeholders to meet each other. So therefore I think that what we do here is to build up a network and then help our players and stakeholders to go into this network and to meet the right people. They cannot do it from a distance. We have to do it here and set up ready and then take our experts to meet right people. Then in the second slide, I try to summarize just in 3 points that how do we succeed, what are the important points to be considered in this kind of work. First of all, I think no wood burns alone. We say it in Finnish, yksinäinen puu ei pala. So it means that it's useless to have a counselor alone. One man can do nothing in a country, in any of these countries. A bunch of people is needed around. So I mean, so if I go, for instance, to meet somebody or some education commission, it's more or less useless if I don't have the next person, the next step in my mind, the people who can take the next step in this process. And in this, I like this name of this network, Team Finland Knowledge Network, because we need all these players that we have in Team Finland. Here, for instance, the support of the embassy and the Ministry for Foreign Affairs has been very, very important. Also the support by the home base, the Ministry of Education and Culture, and then all the organizations below these key ministries, Board of Education, Academy of Finland, Tekes and Finpro, Business Finland as it is now. They are all needed, but after all, it's useless still if the ministries by themselves talk to each other. We need the real experts, the real players and stakeholders of research, meaning higher education institutes and boards like UNIFI and ARENE, who are representing all our universities and universities of applied sciences. They are national players and they have a key role here. And also companies, they are at the same time clients but also partners to us, so they bring substance and expertise and understanding of the markets. Secondly, so we need this, let me see, yes. The second thing in this second slide is clear-cut strategy and roadmap. So it's useless to look around and learn if you don't have any plan, if you don't know what to do next. So it's very important to build up kind of roadmap and strategy. But at the same time, we have to understand that we cannot get a clear and full picture in a minute. So it takes some time before you really understand where to go and who are the key players and what are the opportunities in this country. So it may easily take 1 or 2 years, even from an expert who knows the country already. So we have to be ambitious, but also understand that this is a process. But nevertheless, nothing will take place if there is no clear plan or strategy after all. And then the final point in this second slide, I think that openness to new people, areas, ideas, that is very important. For instance, in a country like China, you don't really know who who has the real power, who has the real relationships. It's not always obvious, neither good ideas. So you have to look, you have to be open, your mind has to be open. Everything is, for instance, in China, is based on personal relationships, but you don't know when you meet the person immediately whom he or she knows. So therefore we have to be ready to meet and listen carefully. Then in the final slide, I say something what we have done in China. I think all we did here has been more or less based on the basic agreements we have been preparing during these years. The most important one here was the learning garden, Sino-Finnish learning garden agreement that we prepared 2 years with the Chinese ministry. It was signed under the premiers of our countries, and then quickly after that we were able to establish the Joint Learning Innovation Institute, which is very unique structure. 9+9 universities from both countries, altogether 18 universities, are linked through this institute to do research on learning, to make learning solutions and edu-technological solutions together, to arrange teacher training and so on. So this is something very, very meaningful. And another big scheme that we have been building is based on the agreements between UNIFI and RNA to the Chinese counterparts like Chinese Academy of Sciences or Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. So the idea is to make first a national frame, and then under this framework the individual players can then conduct their own activities or even make bilateral agreements if needed. The second point here is about regional collaboration. China is it's a huge country, and the sister cities and provinces are the means for many areas in China to make international activities. So they really need this, and it's kind of it's their foreign policy, and it's a common practice in China. And a lot of money is actually in these provinces and provincial cities. So therefore we have to use this kind of tool, and there have been wonderful examples between our cities and Chinese cities, the things that they have been doing together. So this is a really crucial thing, and I think that many of these countries that are now shortlisted by the ministry have the same thing. And then the final thing here is that they're coordinating the things at the home base. It has been very important to coordinate our key players in Finland, and big thanks goes to Tina and all the colleagues in the ministry. That has been wonderful what they have been doing there. Without this team, I would be entirely useless. So this has been really great job. And also, I think what we did with this Joint Learning Innovation Institute is also something that is very useful also when we deal with other countries. So it's kind of pilot exercise where our key players learned to play together, and they are still in the process, but I think that we can utilize this kind of tool also in the future. I think I don't take more of your time, and I hope this was not too messy, but this is maybe key points that I was able to pick up here. Thanks.
Thank you, Mika. That was, I think it was a very good kind of overview of the situation, what is going on there in Beijing. I know that it's rather late already in Beijing, so I'll ask the audience if there's any questions now, so that probably, are there any, if you want to know? So I think that we thank you, Mika, and wish you a good night. Sleep tight and so forth. Okay. Bye and thanks, and we'll continue. Bye, kiitoksia, hyvä. So, as Mika already said, it's that we have some crucial elements here that we are building all this Team Finland knowledge network, all the whole better together for a better world in this internationalization strategy. It is the higher education institutions. That's the crucial partner that we have, and what we have been doing together is that we have been building this together. And now we have actually representatives of UNIFI and ARENE. Both UNIFI is the Universities Finland, Rectors Council of Universities, and then Arene, Rectors Council of University of Applied Sciences. So I would like to ask Liisa, you to start first from the university's perspective. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and Your Excellency, Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen. It's really great to be at this stage, and I thank for this opportunity to comment the establishment of this network. When the news about Team Finland Knowledge Network were published in a newspaper, there appeared quite a lot of comments in social media by academics and scholars, and the reaction was very much on the line that why are we using the very scarce, very limited resources for this kind of network? Isn't it so that for international cooperation, a crucial thing is the excellence of our research and the excellence of our education programs? And indeed, that is true. I think that without excellence in research, without excellence in our research environment, without very well-planned and good study programs, there is no point to speak about enhancing our international cooperation. And therefore, the first comment is that we have to ensure the resources to keep our research and education on an international level. Having said that, it is important to facilitate international network. And it is important even beyond the kind of marketing of our country, its safe environment, its nature, good connections, whatever are important in a general kind of marketing of Finland, also in business. I think that what we should do in order to really benefit of this kind of network at the universities, we should include this internationalization to all of our planning of major programs, or platforms, whether in research or in education. We should have a strategic thinking to include internationalization to our planning. And I think that it is at this point we could benefit of this kind of network. I think that it could be most useful if it could provide advice and services for our planning at an initial phase when we are thinking about new areas of let's say, multidisciplinary environmental research, for instance, or health research, or some wider education programs. And it would be useful if we could contact these kind of ambassadors also already at this stage, and they could tell us whether there could be interest in those fields or those programs in a given country or in a region. Of course, then, well, practically speaking, this would mean providing potential contacts for interested stakeholders abroad, both for the dissemination of information and both for possibilities for cooperation. And to provide also some advice, or at least advice how to get more advice on local circumstances, whether they are related to legal advice or business advice, etc. However, we don't expect, and there's no point to build, to use this kind of networks or build this kind of network for consultancy work, which is needed, for instance, in exporting education. I mean, there we have to find sustainable ways to utilize expertise that is how do I say, that is sustainable also for the business, because it's in the end exporting education should be sustainable in economic terms. Then what I would also like to emphasize is the organization of this network, so that there is accountability and that we can manage this kind of network in a result-oriented way. We know that the experts will formally work under the ambassadors and the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, but the content, of course, needs to be supervised and monitored by the Ministry of Education. And I think that the universities are here crucial as well. Here the Rectors' Council, for instance, UNIFI, should be utilized if we are seeing an establishment of steering group. We would be very happy to be very active there. I think that it could be very useful that there would be a kind of ownership of the universities of this kind of network, that we really would think that it is serving our needs, it's providing help for our attempts to internationalize our activities, so that it could be kind of bottom up and not top down. I think that we don't, at the universities, we cannot react to all kind of good ideas we are getting from the top, but that we could really utilize in our own planning this network. And as was said by Mika Tirronen also, no wood burns alone. These synergies and cooperation are really important, not only with Business Finland, the old FinPro and Tekes networks, which I'm sure there is a lot of overlapping, but also the Finnish cultural and academic institutes. We have to make sure that there are kind of organizational cooperation structures, so that it's not only dependent on personal level friendships in a given country. We have to ensure that the resources are used wisely and within the overall network of Finnish representation abroad. And then on the behalf of universities, we have to bring our own international networks to this cooperation, such as European Universities Association and its sister organizations like the Association of African Universities, for instance. I mean, all these networks already involve a lot of cooperation that clearly would benefit also about this Team Finland knowledge network. So these are my main points. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And now Juha, please. Juha Kämäri is representing Arene. Please.
Thank you. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. So Mika is offline, so I can speak freely now, right? And now I will give some praising words about him as well. I see my role representing Arene here, Rectors' Conference for the Universities of Applied Sciences, as a stakeholder. We have a lot of money at stake, but we have a lot of resources at stake. And we have a lot to achieve from this network. So there is a lot in the game at stakes. I would like to congratulate the Ministry for establishing this network. This is really an important network. And I try to explain why. And I echo some of Mika's words immediately, because I wanted to understand all the functions of the network. There are 3 major goals that are mentioned in this flyer here. But but there are so many functions that we cannot even imagine all of them at this point. Of course, we have some experience from Mika for 5 years in Beijing, and that gives some background to us what kind of achievements can be promoted. And I heard words from Mika's voice: understanding, helping, PR, networking machine, marketing, ambassadors of knowledge. And if you want to crystallize all these words into one word, or like Tapio in the minister's speech used the word diamond, I think the word is facilitate, and I heard Liisa to use that word. Mahdollistaja in Finnish. The network, or more precisely the experts in the network, the persons, not only abroad, also here in Finland, working for this network, are facilitators. And this is something that we have to keep clearly in our minds. There are critical issues that we should be aware of and considered, and should be considered by the steering group and also those who are going abroad. Even though they work for Finland in Beijing or Moscow or Buenos Aires, they are not creating the strategies or the work plans for internationalization. We are. We at the higher education institutions and other organizations, we are creating the work plans and strategies. We should be clear in our heads what we want, actually. And between those two players, those experts abroad and we here at the home bases, there should be a bridging function, a library bridge actually, that bring across those ideas, work plans and strategies to be executed by and facilitated by the experts abroad. And my feeling is that the rectors' conferences, both UNIFI and ARENE, can take some of the bridging functions for that what I mentioned, but not all of them. There should be other networks as well operating. There should be clear understanding within the higher education institutions what can be done and what should be done. And the international coordinators within each organization should also be involved in order this to be 100% working and productive. Of course, there are a lot of practical issues now since this is starting its work. Of course, the first real important practical issue is the selection of the experts. We need the best possible experts to be there. And there are a lot of expectations, of course, with that respect. So I see some very positive and bright future ahead for this network, and I clearly want the higher education institutions to support this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juha, and thank you, Liisa. At this stage, we could have some discussion. If you want to raise some issues, if you have some concerns. Marianne is here still. Tapio is here as the Director General of our department. Birgitta Vuorinen is there from our department as well. Jaana Palojärvi from our ministry as well. And so there's many people who have been involved in this in this preparation work from our ministry, but also from you stakeholders here. So if you have any comments or questions at this stage, please, now this is the possibility. Ja voi käyttää suomea tietenkin myös, jos se on helpompaa. Okay. Maria, please. Maria-Liima Toivonen is from VTT and a member of the forum.
Now that you announced I'm from VTT, I would like to express the view from the research and technology organizations that in the speeches and in the program, I saw then less emphasized than the role of the higher education institutes. And then what is the plan how to involve the research and technology organizations then to make the bridge with the innovation aspect?
Thank you very much. This is something that we have to take aboard in the forum, but now in the forum we have actually a member of Tulanet, and you are there as an expert of innovation. And then we have Business Finland there, and then we have researchers, and I think that there is a good opportunity here to really think that how we work on these issues further, and then how we can organize different kind of discussions, dialogues, and so forth. Yeah, Minna, please.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the good presentations and for this initiative. I'm very happy to see this whole forum to be established, and actually also very happy to be part of that forum. And I read the documentation with a great interest, and I see the very important words and the goals. I see in Finnish it would be tavoiteasetanta ja mittaristot. So I see that this, for the whole international network what Finland has around the country globally, would be now very important to think first and to set the, in Hanken we have been setting and doing our strategy work now last year, and we've been discussing only about these KPIs. So I see the excellent opportunity now to set the KPIs for the whole this work in the way that actually we can reduce our individual work a lot. We just yesterday ended our application period for the international students, and we increased our applicants with the 70%. But it is a huge work when one individual organization does that only. So I see there is now a huge opportunity finally start doing like a whole country level work globally. And KPIs, now I have my very dear friend, colleague with me, Janne. I'm whispering to him now how we set the KPIs, and this would be a good thing to the whole team. So I'm extremely happy for whole this forum.
Thank you very much. Johanna Hakala from Academy of Finland.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm part of the steering group for the Team Finland Knowledge Network. And I would like to ask the representatives of higher education institutions here, how do you see, I understand perfectly that educational expert must be very strategic, but how about other educational cooperation and research collaboration? Do you think it can be strategic at the level of the institution, and what is the stage in this strategic work?
You want to answer, Lisa?
Yes, I think it can be, and it should be, because we can find synergies between education and research, and also having impact in policy issues, for instance, and therefore. At the universities, we have been already looking for, and some universities have already named strategic partners with whom we have cooperation at different levels. And also these international networks like European University Associations or leading European research institutes, LERU, I mean, they involve both research and teaching activities and exchange programs. Much of this cooperation is is done at the level of departments and even subjects and individual professors, and that is very good, and we have to support them at that work. But what this network can provide is a kind of prestige to get connections to the institutional level, and that is how I think we should use it, and a kind of wise division of labor is needed, that not nitty-gritty issues are put in the hands of these experts, but we really, also because they will be part of the embassies, I think that there's a kind of very institutional level that is important then, and can open doors for us to make official agreements at the university level.
Well, thank you for throwing the ball back to us. It's of course a good question, but it can be answered only by the higher education institutions individually. Speaking for my institution, the Satakunta University of Applied Sciences, we have strategic partners in China and in Southern Africa, in Namibia, as well as in South Africa. So those are well placed for us, of course, but each university should tell their plans and their strategies. But speaking for Arene, of course, Arene is looking at China nowadays. As you could see from Mika's slides, there are some initiatives that have been, and some doors that have been opened, and we aim to go through those doors and to start cooperating with those institutes to find new partners and new opportunities there for Arene and Arene's members. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other comments or questions? Melissa Plus, please, from Unipid.
Thank you, Tina. Yes, I'm Melissa Plath from Unipid, which is the Finnish University Partnership for International Development. I think that this network will be very interesting. We're really excited to see what this can do in terms of supporting collaboration. But what we would like to see, and perhaps the network can focus on this a little bit, is the role of global responsibility. We were missing that a little bit from the strategy and from the way forward, and we would like to see how this network can really support the universities, higher education institutions fulfilling that important role of global responsibility. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a very important message, and I think that's for the forum to think that how we can go forward with that. If there's, at this point, we have some time after the next presentations. So as you saw from the program, we have kind of two parts of this event. The first one was concentrating on this Team Finland Knowledge Network, and the other part will concentrate on two other issues that are very important part of this whole new strategy, linjaukset, the policies to promote international Finnish higher education and research. It's a document that was published last year. And as you can see, we have here different kind of sections or parts of the guidelines. But then there is one very important here underneath the balls. It's the genuinely international higher education communities, and that's one key issue for the forum to think about. And then very important part is this a warm welcome to Finland. And this is something that we have to think, and it's very actual at the moment, it's discussed very much, that how we can attract talents to Finland. It's students and then actually all other talents as well. So, and this is why this other section or the other part of this event will be done so that first Adam Smale will talk about this attraction part, and then David Hoffman will talk about the genuinely international higher education community? Is it a dream, or is it something that we have somewhere in mind? But how we can go further to it. But now I would like to give the floor to you, Adam, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Ambassadors, Minister, distinguished members of the audience, my name is Adam Smale, and from the beginning of this year I am the Dean of the School of Management at the University of Vaasa, and I come into this topic from three perspectives. 14 years ago I moved to Finland to start my PhD studies. So I've been an international PhD student, an international teacher, researcher, and now an international dean. According to information I've been given, I'm the first non-Finnish dean in business studies ever. So I also see hope here. The second perspective is that my research and teaching areas focus on international human resource management, kansainvälinen henkilöstöjohtaminen, and talent. So I also have a personal interest in this issue as well. And then perhaps thirdly, of course, as Dean, I am looking for help and support and encouragement in attracting talent to Finland as much as is possible. And I see some interesting opportunities and challenges in that regard as I seek to attract and recruit the best people into my school. Let me start off with some of the research that I've just finished doing with a couple of colleagues, which looks at macro talent management. In other words, if you look at country level indicators and if you do a country comparison, how does Finland fare? We use very heavily the Global Talent Competitiveness Index, which is a collection of economic and labour economic indicators to look at how Finland fares in macroeconomic terms when it comes to talent management. And it's built on 4 pillars: enable, attract, grow and retain. And these contribute to the development of 2 different categories of skills. Finland is 9th in the report that was published in 2017. Other Scandinavian countries also faring very well. Of course, what I'm focusing on today in the short 15 minutes that I have is the attract part. And we can see, as we all know, being Finnish, most of us, or having lived in Finland for a long time, we can maybe understand the reason for high performance in grow and enable. This is largely to do with equality, social mobility and education. On the attract front, there's still some work to do if we want to be up there with the best. According to this report at least, is Finland sort of being let down? Well, ease of hiring, the amount of FDI and technology transfer, brain gain, in other words, CEO views on how easy it is to attract talent to Finland, ranked 52 out of, I think, nearly 160 countries. Migrant stock, so how many non-Finnish nationals are living in Finland of employment age, and then, of course, taxation. So this is sort of a broad cross-country comparison, up to date, and of course attract is something where there's room for improvement. If we go from sort of looking top down to looking at amongst those who already have lived in Finland for a longer time. So this is perhaps less scientific. This is from Expat Insider, run by the Internations Group. So asking a cross-section of people who are working in Finland and in 67 other countries how they find different aspects of working abroad. Okay. Now here what I would like to raise is the somewhat paradoxical nature of Finland doing reasonably well in terms of quality of life. Yeah, so when we look at leisure options, personal happiness, safety, security, health and well-being, of course Finland's going to be doing well. We know this. Okay, but how is it possible that in a country with high standards of living is it so difficult to settle in? And before we get too depressed at Finland's ranking of 59 amongst 67 countries, is that we still rank better than all the other Nordic countries. But this is more than just a coincidence. Yeah. There's also big differences between, well, why is this? This is largely about infrastructure. This is about public services, and Finland does this very well. This is largely cultural. This is cultural. And one could say this is the more difficult aspect to change. We don't give up. It still needs hard work. But we need to understand that that's not the only picture. When we're talking about people here, we talk about networks, we talk about organizations. This is about people, remember. This is about people coming to Finland. And what influences your long-term intentions to stay? Well, you'll find it in here as well as in some of these other things. So Finland is a paradoxical country, runs things really well, but the culture can be somewhat unforgiving. If we dip into then the field of talent management, what can we learn? Well, we know that individuals will look for different things when it comes to moving for employment. First thing we need to do is sell Finland, obviously. Following that, we've got to sell the city, the region. In Vaasa, we're spending a lot of time thinking, and together with the city of Vaasa, thinking, how are we going to do this? Yeah, we find it difficult to attract people from Jyväskylä. So what has Vaasa got to offer? And then we can start to turn on, what is it that brings people across the borders, across seas, into academia in another country? It might be the country, it might be the city, but do they focus on the university? Do they focus on the rewards of working in that employing organization in that country? Do they focus on aspects related to the job? Or is it to do with the people that work there? What are the real magnets? And there's actually surprisingly little research out there about what attracts academic talent, but I've got a few ideas. But some of the basic principles we need to think about, and here we actually draw on marketing terminology. In marketing, they talk about what's your unique selling point. Well, if you think about your employer brand, or if you think about your country of employment brand, okay, what's Finland's employer brand? What's the University of Vaasa's employer brand? Well, it needs to be inspirational. It needs to be enticing. What will entice people to Finland? Second of all, it needs to be unique. How do we set ourselves apart? How do we set ourselves apart from other countries in Europe and from other regions? Thirdly, fit. Does it help us attract the right people? You heard a lady from Hanken talk about the increase in the amount of student applications. Great. But has that been an increase in the kind of students we want? That's the real measure. Yeah? And then the ultimate measure is how many accept our offer. That's then the ultimate measure. And global. Yeah? Do we need to adapt our message depending on where we are recruiting? Because remember, what's enticing, what's unique, it's relative. You know, occupational health might be to some people, wow, your occupational health system is fantastic in Finland. Salary, on the other hand, well, it's relative. But so what do you emphasize? Do you go with some standard messages? Or do you then go with adapted messages depending on where Finland does incredibly well, and Finnish universities and polytechnics do incredibly well, compared to places that you have available locally in your country or your system? So do we have to then adapt the message? And remember, it often helps to think about attracting talent in terms of an exchange. Students and talent, academic talent, pay a price to come to Finland. They make certain sacrifices. Yeah, maybe it's a harsh climate, difficult language, high cost of living, some of the things that I very quickly went through. However, they also get something in return. High standard of living, social mobility, safety. Yeah? Recruitment is often a proposition about what you give or have to give up, but what you get in return. Yeah? So what is our deal that we put on the table when we go out to recruit, when we go out to China, when we go out to Brazil? Yeah? What do they have to give and give up, but what do they get in return? And that deal needs to obviously be a net positive. They get more back than they give up. And we have to then sort of think in those terms. What can we learn from the field of global mobility and expatriation? What might be surprising with this first point, but it may be unsurprising to those who work in an international sort of recruitment capacity, is that one of the biggest reasons for expatriate failure or for a relocation being unsuccessful is the failure to adjust by the spouse and the family. That's almost reason number one. Yeah? The academic talent, they get to adjust through their job, through their work networks, through colleagues. They get a lot of support. But what about the spouse? What about the child? And when I negotiate with international talent, I'm negotiating as much with the family as I am with the individual. Yeah? Where can my kids go to school? How safe is it here? What about the property prices, etc.? And then one increasing issue is the trailing spouse, and this can be these days as much a woman as it is a man. What about my career? And with more and more dual career couples, we need a good answer to that question. Yeah? In Vasa, you can't just walk into a job if you don't speak Finnish and Swedish. What about MBA possibilities then? Can they train? Can they, you know, and this is what we find we're often talking about. So who's responsible for their integration? Perceived support, or lack of it, can sometimes be more influential in feelings of adjustment and integration than the actual amount of support that's on offer. Do I feel like I am being supported? And quite often we're dealing with perceptions and not reality when it comes to job satisfaction and adjustment, especially when the initial honeymoon period turns into culture shock. Yeah? And that can happen after a few days, or it can happen after a few weeks, or it can happen after a few months. We tend to sort of see this kind of curve. Honeymoon, everything's different but great, to everything's different and it's awful. And then slowly but surely you start to adjust. So making sure that the support is also there when culture shock hits. Perhaps somewhat obvious maybe, but global mobility is highly stressful and can affect well-being. And this is contagious. So again, going back to spouse and family, if the spouse and family is not adjusting, it's contagious to the academics that we hire, and they're also feeling like they're not adjusting very well. And an old notion, but one that's still very much true today, is contact breeds liking. This is sort of a theory of acculturation, which say, how do you get people to acculturate? We've looked at this in terms of expatriation, but we've also drawn from immigration studies. And actually, one simple answer, although of course the answer is never simple, but one key component is contact. If you want international talent to come to Finland and stay in Finland, they acculturate through contact. Contact with locals, contact with the culture, contact with the language. What we tend to find is that this can resolve misunderstandings and it leads to high quality relationships. Isolation, isolating yourself from the language, from Finnish people, or then various kinds of commuting relationships where you have two bases, doesn't work in the long term. Not really. So we have to also be realistic when recruiting and when looking for the right people, that we're not setting ourselves up for a short-term rather than a long-term relationship. What universities and polytechnics then need to be able to answer is what are academics like? So far we can say that many of the things we've talked about could be generic across many different categories of professionals, but what do academics really want? So when we talk about why come to Finland, when we talk about what kind of employment opportunities there are, what do they want? And does it even make sense to talk about academics as a sort of a singular homogeneous group? Yeah? Academics vary from career stage, doctoral student to full professor. We're talking about teachers and research directors. We're talking about different subjects and fields. Do those operating in the humanities, are they attracted by the same things as those in the life sciences, natural sciences? This is important because marketing would say that you have to tailor your message differently, and negotiation will involve different things. And then, of course, we've got their background. As I said, there's not much research on this, but so this is based on experience that I've had together with other people that I know that have been active trying to recruit internationally. Career opportunities, obviously. I say obviously, but you know, for a long time we've had fixed-term offers of employment for most people, unless you get to full professor. This is, of course, changing. As we know, the legal landscape for employment and universities are looking towards longer contracts as well as tenure-track positions. Is this sufficient? Is it worth uprooting for a fixed-term contract or even for a tenure-track? Do I see international academics in senior positions? Yeah? Yeah, I give a dramatic pause there. Do I see international academics as senior positions? I'm talking about university management, university board level. Is there walk the talk? Is internationalization likely to happen at the speed that we want to in universities and polytechnics that are predominantly, if not exclusively, Finnish speaking or Swedish speaking? Time for research. This is a big one in the context of tenure track, where you do not get to pass go until you've produced a certain amount of academic research output. Making sure that you have enough time for research is real currency for academics. This is what they spend a lot of time asking about. How much teaching do I have to do? How much time in Finland do I have to spend writing huge amounts of funding applications? How many PhD students do I have to supervise? This takes me away from research. And this is a big thing. Compensation, okay. I often discuss over a drink or two with fellow deans, what is the market price for an associate professor? For a world-class associate professor, what's the market price? And are we willing to pay it? Of course, the difficult answer might be that the market price is about the price for a senior tenured professor in our organization. Yeah? So YPJ goes out the window. Or does it? You know, do we have the tools to compete in order to pay the market price? Or do we deflect and look at other things? What we also find is that when it comes to research, do academics do research with universities or with teams or with individuals? And the key here is what happens if someone that you're doing research with moves university? Does your research collaboration stop, or do you follow the individual? Yeah, what we tend to find is that a mixture of both. It is field specific, of course. Great laboratories, great centres tend to have a great reputation, but in other fields you follow individuals. What it means in terms of recruitment, though, it can be that, and I believe Aalto, Ingmar Björkman, the Dean of Aalto Business School, is a good colleague of mine, and at least what they're trying to do is hire star professors and let those professors act like magnets. Yeah? Come here because he or she works here, and let's see if that works. And they've had a reasonable amount of success. And then lastly, great data. I work in a number of different research consortiums where there is great envy and jealousy about how easy it is to do great research in Finland. Our access to data, the fact that regulatory bodies and research participants are generally very supportive. And that's something that we can sell. That's something that, that would pull academics here. A couple of words about paths to internationalization. This is something as a university we've been thinking about, I've been thinking about, but I think it also applies to the national level. If we can simplify things a little bit, it makes sense to try and think about how to internationalize, because this does have implications for where you invest, limited resources, time and energy. Now, one might be grow your own, so this kind of grassroots internationalization. What would be the logic here? The logic would be attract students when they are at their most mobile and least expensive. Okay? So, bachelor's, master's students, get them in early, which means internationalizing obviously our bachelor's and master's programs, get them in early, take the best of those into our graduate schools, into our doctoral programs, invest in making those attractive. Some of the obstacles we find there are, how do we fund doctoral studies? Yeah, that's a long conversation normally when you speak to a potential PhD student, and it normally starts with, it's complicated. Yeah? That's not the best way if we're growing our own, because what you will find with Grow Your Own is that it's easier to take a gamble on an international talent if you've seen and watched them perform in Finland in front of your very eyes, compared to recruiting someone from outside based on a CV and a Skype interview. Yeah, this is what you see. Remember, decision makers are very human. Yeah, and when they take risks, it's easier to take a risk on something that you've seen and something that you trust. So this again would be one of the other logics here. What we then have to do is ensure that employers adhere to diversity guidelines and take risks in recruitment decisions. So that would be one path. The other path would be buying ready-made talent. So this would be the area of international talent search and selection. So you scour the globe. Some could say that the talent pool for scholarly talent is global. If you want a professor in a certain area of science, it can be that people in that field know who all 15 of them are. We know where they are. We know who they are. We've just got to go and entice them and approach them and steal them. This happens in the business world. We could bring that logic, of course, into academia. So the logic here would be to tempt or steal away top talent that are worth the big investment. And I think this Team Finland Knowledge Network could play quite a key role there, together with the universities and polytechnics. What we need there, though, is the key role of an attractive employment package, because we need to tempt them away, and because they are probably less mobile, and because they are going to be more expensive. Plus, we've got the family issues there. We would then need to use professional recruitment services and address potential integration issues. And then, of course, we have the hybrid, which most would use is the hybrid. It's a mixture of both. However, the answer to which path you put more of your emphasis on will depend on actually which university you are and where you tend to find you have more success. Not all universities will have the ammunition to buy talent ready-made. They just won't. They won't be attractive enough, at least not yet, and they won't have the tools to be able to compete. For some, it may be the grassroots internationalization. Get really competitive bachelor's and master's and doctoral programs up and running and grow your own. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I'm standing here. This is how it can happen. So, just a couple of closing thoughts. I'm probably running over time. Quite often what I face, and many of you that are sort of representing international issues in whichever bodies you're working in, is we often find that it's difficult to convince people the reasons for internationalization. So we need what's a lot of called issue selling. We need to sell the issue of internationalization. And again, the lady from Hunken talked about KPIs. Now, I think one of the confusions that can arise that result in cynicism is when we confuse internationalization as a goal and as a measure. Is internationalization a goal, so it's internationalization for internationalization's sake? Or is internationalization a measure of how attractive we are? The reason we go out into the world to attract talent is based on the belief that they don't all reside in Finland. The reason we internationalize our research networks is because not all great ideas originate in Finland. So is internationalization the goal or the measure? We've got to be careful that the measure doesn't become the goal in itself. Internationalization occurs via recruitment and selection. If you talk about recruiting talent at home, but these decision makers, are they trained in this? Do they spend much time on search and selection? Are they lazy recruiters? Do they just recruit the nearest person to them? Remember, these are human beings. Do they receive enough support and scrutiny from HR? I flew down here from Vasa in an aeroplane, and I would use the analogy that would you let someone fly you that hadn't been trained as a pilot? No, of course you wouldn't. But would you let someone make hiring decisions that haven't been trained how to hire and recruit properly? Now think about the importance of recruitment in a knowledge-based industry, where who you take in the Finnish context, where it's difficult to fire people, in fact, legally it's almost impossible, recruitment's got to be really important. But how much support and training do the decision makers have? Is there a glass ceiling at university management level? And related to internationalization, is there a language ceiling? I'm breaking through that now, slowly but surely. But last couple of points, internationalization is a mindset. We often talk about the war for talent. It sounds like just stupid rhetoric, that started well over 15 years ago. But of course, the point is that it's a mindset, it's a war, so we need to fight, we need to try new things, and we need to never be satisfied. Second of all, it's a global war for talent, so we need to be where the fight is. We need the team knowledge network, we need ambassadors, we need to be where the people are. Can't do this from home. Not really. But I believe that grassroots internationalization is already in full swing in Finland. If you remember, the ministry emphasized bringing in international master's programs in around 2005. In our university, as well as many other universities, we've created these international programs. We've brought the students in. And I now, from where I sit, I see them penetrating the postdoc labour pool. And it's happening. It's real. And I think you'll see it more and more as we come. But that's all I'll say for now. So thanks very much. Kiitos.
Thank you, Adam. So let's get straight away to the next, or the last speaker. It's actually senior researcher David Hoffman from University of Jyväskylä. And he has a bit different kind of perspective, but very important part of this whole thinking that we have ahead of the internationalization at home, as well as the genuinely international higher education and research community. So then, as we have heard his talk, we will have time for discussion, and then we can raise a glass, and then we'll just talk. But now, please, David, the floor is yours.
Okay, is this microphone picking up here? Excellency, ambassadors, colleagues, several friends I've seen in the audience, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for this invitation to speak here today. I'm mainly going to speak. I've researched international mobility of personnel for the last couple of decades, focusing on Finland in general, but Europe and across the world, these countries here. Especially these days, I'm very intrigued by the notion of network analysis, and our latest study, a 6-country comparative study that we published last year, was one of the first comparative analyses that used social network analysis to try to get to the bottom or to see some new insights that we couldn't see before from social network analysis of academic networks. Okay, so anyway, I need to limit the scope and do some qualification before I start. Mainly, I'm interested in the intersections of migration, mobilities, and internationalization of personnel. I made this decision around 20 years ago when I had an epiphany that the thing is, in higher education institutions, ministries, and government agencies, if you get personnel right, so then everything is possible, especially new ideas are really literally anything's possible. If you get the personnel wrong, you get 1 year of internationalization, the same year repeated 20, 30 times. This is no problem to go to any of these countries in the globe and find 1 year repeated 20 times versus 20 years of experiential learning in a given field or in a given setting in a research team. I'm especially interested when we look at the personnel in higher education institutions, government ministries, and agencies, what happens across societies as a result of their actions. What's really important, most of these remarks are based on, I have to draw the distinction between the published studies of my colleagues and I, research in progress, brand new hypotheses based on our latest published research, and very many ongoing, very dynamic discussions, some of which I'll get into in a minute. I also draw the distinction, my scholarship, it's not focused on students, exports, transnational provision, almost any of these things. I'm interested in students to the extent when they become academic staff, when they go from getting their master's degree to entering our Finnish 4-stage research career system, doctoral student, postdoc, independent researcher, professor. So then I become very interested in what happens with and to students in different fields of study. Internationalization is simple, but it's not easy. But basically, I'm not saying, I'm not trying to be facetious or anything, but it's different than selling it, branding it, or packaging it. Although, with respect to everybody who's talked here before, these things are really important, and in Finnish higher education, to be fair, I think we've done kind of a mediocre to lousy job at this during the past 2 decades or so when I've been studying higher education research in Finland and in comparative research. But basically, when I start looking as a higher education researcher, especially when I'm doing comparative research, I'm always interested in a certain tension, top-down vision and steering at the regional, national level, universities and universities of applied sciences, faculties, colleges, institutes. These are all really interesting focal points. But what I really dive into, my colleagues and I and my team, what we're really interested in, what happens in departments, in units, in research teams, research groups or programs, and with individual scholars. So basically, that's a long-winded way of saying, basically, I'm interested in the tension between what you all think you're doing and what you're actually doing. And this is nothing new in social sciences, but to me, when you actually get into contrasting what happens in different departments, units, across disciplines, so you get into some pretty interesting differences. The hazards of, in some ways, I'm absolutely the wrong person to ask to a launch event of a new program. So there's hazards. I'm always walking a tightrope when I come into an audience like this, because I can tell you the reasons empirically and theoretically why it is a really good idea for some people who are someplace else, why they should relocate here. If they're already here, I can tell you with empirical and theoretical clarity why they should continue the next phase of their career. And I can also tell you, based on wherever it is you come from, why you should avoid here, forget about it, or if you're here, leave as quickly as possible for the next stage of your career. This is not, especially the more we understand about network logic, the more we understand that leaving is not necessarily a tragedy or a bad thing, because especially if you go and do a postdoc in one place, your doctoral student in another place, end up as a professor in another place, that's generally a good thing, especially if it's been a series of good experiences. But it can also be quite the opposite. It's very easy to run around to our higher education institutions and find people pretty stuck and in pretty desperate circumstances that are wondering how in the world did I get in this mess? And how to avoid that is a good thing. And an important thing, if there's something unique about what it is my colleagues and I have recently done, especially comparatively speaking, is in the context of Finnish higher education. I'm talking about Finnish-born, Finnish scholars of Finnish parents who grew up here. I'm talking about Finnish scholars of migrant background, which we are seeing in some fields of sciences, which we are not seeing in others. And I'm also talking about people from the international global labor market and the very interesting differences we have between these. The only interesting theoretical approach, things like that, or empirical realities are things where you can talk about these people who mix together in very complex ways within our higher education institutions in the same breath. You need to understand really what are the key relationships to have in focus here. I'm not going to bore you with the science. I think people have very weird ideas and stereotypes about what it is social science and policy analysts like me do in real life. If you Google scholar, scientists, and nerds, you get a bunch of pictures like this. So if somebody wants to talk about the science of this, I'm happy to over a coffee after this is done. Right now, I'm not going to go into it. I think some of the personal and more practical insights that we gain from our research, from my colleagues and I, they're much more valuable. What I get into these conversations with people, not only in Finland, but in plenty of countries, where we end up having a heart-to-heart about professionally and personally. This is, I echo Professor Small here, that you have to understand the difference between somebody's personal life and their professional life, and especially their family. Your best days are ahead of you if you relocate here, stay here, avoid here, or leave here. And that's a very hard set of discussions to have with some people, but all of us have them, especially anybody in here who's mobile and has spent time being mobile knows you come to these certain points where you have to decide sometimes as an individual, sometimes you and your spouse as your family, what are we going to do here? What's our next move? My career, our kids' possibilities. The key dimensions that answer the organizer's question, she sent me this really interesting title, that Are We Dreaming of Truly, Genuinely Internationalization? There's two key dimensions I look at now these days if I go out and on a new study or something like that. I'm especially interested in Finland's 4-stage research career stage. Doctoral student, postdoc, independent researcher, professor. Who's going through that? Who's not? And the differences between who is and who isn't. And where internationalization of personnel, especially at stage 3 and 4, again echoing Professor Small, when you're talking about group leaders and professors, where it is needed, where it is not needed, where the unit staff are aware why this is the case, where the unit staff are completely unaware why this is the case. This gives you 4 different sets of departments you're looking at. And all these remarks, this is not confined to Finnish higher education. There's a lot of similarities across the Nordic countries, and especially in mainland Europe, a lot of this stuff generally holds true. So basically, the answer to the question Tina sent me, are we dreaming of genuinely international higher education research? When I first heard that question, I thought, interesting question, only problem is there's 3 answers to this question at least. There's 4, I guess. So in world-class settings, the answer is no, you're not dreaming. There's world-class settings in this country that go back 20, 30 years. And these people are the best in the world at what they do. There's nobody better. There's people as good, and they're scattered around the globe. Their competition, they know all of them scattered around. But the thing is, there's no big dream. And these people have existed a long time, and they are one of our most formidable attractions here. And this is long-established practice, and they are very well aware of what they need in terms of their internationalization. But when you get down to like what we use a football analogy, world-class national champions, local heroes, when you get to your nationally significant programs, there's 2 answers I could give you. You're not necessarily dreaming where the internationalization of personnel, especially at stage 3 and 4, is needed, and unit staff is aware of this, improving over time, but experiencing challenges. So anyway, this is a pretty healthy starting point, especially for the kind of initiative you all are launching here today. But there's another setting where the internationalization of personnel, especially at stage 3 and 4, again echoing Professor Small, it's the biggest key indicator I can get when I'm doing a purposeful selection of a country comparison or international comparison is, do I see professors and deans, unit heads, people in the strategic management unit? If not, I become very aware, okay, this is the kind of place I'm dealing with. And where the internationalization of personnel at these levels is needed and the staff is unaware why this is the case, they need new international staff. Going back to the speaker from Beijing earlier, it's about new ideas, it's about different voices at the table, it's about speaking critically and challenging assumptions. The one thing we found out in our international comparative studies, there is no such thing as a safe assumption. You can't assume that what we're going to sell here is going to sell anywhere, and we're much too uncritical about what we accept from other places. Again, local heroes tied in when you're talking about programs, higher education institutions that have an extremely local focus. Again, you get into a lot of areas where internationalization is interesting, but it's fairly optional depending if your son or daughter is training to be an accountant or something like this. Maybe it's nice, but not needed, but with the caution that the moment they get their degree, they're probably going to meet somebody from another country, and then all of a sudden, all of these things become very real if they become, like Professor Small said, a trailing spouse. So there's these different answers to these questions that is important, and this is very paradoxical about personnel. The real paradox here is in many settings we need migrant or mobile personnel far more than they need us. There's countries, continents, companies, and communities that understand this way better than we do. The thing is, the red carpet is rolled out for talent. And if they're any good, there has to be another reason for them to stay here. It's not going to be because they can't get a better salary, especially if they're really talented, or better conditions. There are the things we can give them, quality of life-wise, but it's different. So the big paradox here, where migrant talent is absent in key settings, we need to be far more critical and honest about understanding why that is and act on it. And especially in these settings where the personnel we need the most are the least likely to be recruited, selected, promoted, and retained. That's the paradox. These are both true statements. We need them a lot more than they need us. And the places we need them the most, they are the least likely people to go through the pipeline. And so empirically, this is becoming very clear. Observations going forward. This is, again, what the speaker from Beijing said. The personnel and their ideas are the most powerful leverage I've found as a focus in my own research and the research my colleagues and I do. It's personnel who run the place. Students are interesting, but personnel run the place, and it's on us to change things. It's kind of rare to meet host nationals who really get what's entailed in committing to the next stage of their career in 24/7, 365 days a year in a different system, university and setting, using multiple languages. Of course, some people do get this in some way. Maybe they've had an exchange period in high school or something like that. But I would respectfully point out, often very few people understand what it's like to integrate as a migrant in this country. This country is very challenging in some ways, especially depending where you're from. It's for somebody, I won't say names or anything. For some people, it's no problem. Some people, it's challenging. When reading visions, it's easy to imagine the lack of critical thinking grounded in empirical realities. I say this with all due respect, but you have to start with bold visions and wanting to go do this, making good networks. But if you don't know the empirical realities, what you're actually facing in the departments where this stuff actually needs to work, it's limited to what you can do. National level settings, along with strategic management in higher education institutions, offers a potential leverage point. My team and I are looking a lot harder. It used to be conventionally, okay, let's look at the professors, the doctoral students, the postdocs, etc. But now we're also looking, like Professor Small said that who's in your strategic development unit? Who's your rector? Who are the deans in this place? This tells us something, and potentially very much more leverage. So I think it comes down to visions and slogans that you do need versus critical questions, analysis, and conversations. The hardest conversations I have are with talented personnel who want to stay and advance, but understand already themselves that this is not going to happen in this particular department. They're very clear about that. And this is something that needs to change, especially in those settings where we really need to hold on to those people, where we need their very new voices. It's even more complicated, like I just said this, when we really need their talent, critical insights, and voice in the settings where it's missing. This is absolute necessity in some fields of studies, not others. This is most complicated when families, and it's not very hard to find one family member, one spouse who has a clear way forward in our system, and even an attractive way forward, a solid career path, with the other spouse perhaps being pushed in a different direction outside the country. A lot of people try to make that work, but it's really, this is not, again, limited to Finnish higher education. This is something that my colleagues and I, we bump into all the time. We live it. These kinds of realities. So this is what we're up against. Okay, and I'll leave you with this. It's not a conclusion. This is what I ask new doctoral students, postdocs, even interns or master's degree students. when they want to come to one of the two groups I'm leading right now, I ask them this question. If they can answer it, if they can give me a decent answer, the conversation will continue. If they're uncritical, I don't have time. I'm sure they're nice people and things like that, but we really need a lot more critical thinking. We need to know to question our unquestioned assumptions a lot better than we do right now. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that these are very important questions and thoughts that we have to take into account when we are starting the work of the forum. But now I think that before the drinks, we have a couple of time questions that if you want to comment now, or then we can raise the glass and continue with some sparkling. Okay, Minna, please.
Maybe I should start, lady from Hanken. So, to present myself, I was too fast with my comment. I'm Minna Martikainen and Dean for Education in Hanken School of Economics, and my professorship is in actually financial accounting. And to Vaasa professor, I could say my background is Vaasa too. So I've been there in the days when Vaasa started to talk about and take in international students, founded the first programs. And there I have to say a couple of things that it is actually exactly like you say, and agree both of the presentations that it is kind of that internationalization should not be measured, but to think why and what we can offer and actually to integrate it to our society. So this is the starting point in the whole. I'm probably just a little bit cynical now and pointing out with the KPIs because I've been involved quite a long time and we talk about internationalization and now we start to have problems in the economy and in the business, and we've been talking about it so long time. That's why I came like on a very practical that let's try to do it now something in a very measurable way. My main point basically is that Finnish businesses start to really need our actions. And actually what we did in Hanken, we established just a very easy thing, a program to show to international students that we are helping them with their careers. We call this our program International Talent Program. And this is what we told when we said we were not recruiting only students for student purposes. We try to tell them what we can offer to them and at the same time to Finnish businesses. It's an easy thing, but it is amazingly difficult to do. And when you take it to your own actions, try to think that what can be our value added. So there are simple things, but to model it and do it. And this is what we actually would like to help and to maybe to bring this forum to try to say that, okay, this is what and how we can help others.
Excellent, thank you. Very short ones. First, Kirsi from University of Helsinki and then Lisa.
Thank you, Tiina. Yes, hi, I'm Kirsi. I'm from the University of Helsinki, but I represent all the HR specialists at the universities in Finland. It's a great honor that our little FAMO network has been called here, and we are so happy also that this initiative is going on. Definitely there are lots of lessons from Finland and for Finland that can be taken into account. Being quite a practical person, I just wanted to check what are the next steps. What can the people who are now watching this network and the forum closely, obviously, what can they expect to happen next? Thank you.
Okay, I'll give to Lisa first and then I'll try to answer your question.
I just want to thank the two presentations and just to tell that at the University of Tampere we started, we established a search committee for all open or potentially open posts. And it was also a kind of mental change, because we still have the old tradition of civil service agencies where even our professors were thinking that it's somehow it's discrimination.
And for those who are there watching the stream, this will be available at our website. And then I wish you all a good day forward. Bye-bye.